Today my guest is U.S. Senator Pat Toomey. Senator Toomey joined the United States Senate in 2011 and is a member of the Finance, Budget, Banking, and Joint Economic Committees. He also serves as a member of the bipartisan Congressional Task Force to fight Alzheimer's disease and of the working group committed to reducing and eventually eliminating the backlog of disability claims with the Veterans Administration. Senator Toomey, it is great to have you on our program today.
Thanks for having me, John. Great to be with you.
We have several things that I know that you're working on. I know you're very limited for time, but we do appreciate you being with us. One of the things we want to talk about is the veterans here, and of course in Erie County. I was not aware until I got the statistic that we have over 22,000 veterans here in Erie County. And of course we know the backlog. We've seen this on the news, and I know that the Senate and the House are trying to work on getting these things taken care of with the Veterans Administration. What can you tell us about that, sir?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's unacceptable to have a big backlog like this. You know, men and women who serve our country and take the kind of risks that they take and make the sacrifices that they make, they deserve better treatment than that. So, fortunately, we've made some progress, but we've got a ways to go. I've met with the VA at every level of the VA frequently. There has been some progress. I'm a sponsor of legislation that I think will be helpful. The two main thrusts of this legislation are, one, to make sure the VA is providing better instruction to the veteran so that when the forms are filled out, they're filled out properly. You know, this is a big bureaucracy. You make one mistake on the form and it can really delay things. So getting that right is part of it. The other part is to require the VA to identify, and require really the GAO to identify those VA facilities that have best practices, have the shortest waits, do the best job getting the response to our veterans quickly and appropriately, and make sure that those best practices are then adopted across the country, because like anything else, you know, we have some veterans VA facilities that are performing very well and others not so well. What we want to do is elevate the ones that are not performing as well. So there's a lot of work I'm doing also to try to help veterans getting back to work, especially post 9/11 veterans, men and women coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. As you know, John, unfortunately they have a higher unemployment rate than the American population as a whole, and it should be the exact opposite. I mean, these are people who have made a sacrifice for their country. They are well trained. They've demonstrated a commitment to teamwork and achieving a goal and the kinds of things that are valuable to an employer. So hopefully we'll make some more progress on helping our veterans get back to work.
I agree with you there. If there's anything that we do owe our veterans, it is this. It is good medical care for them after they get back here. Absolutely. And I appreciate what you're doing with that. And I'm sure all the veterans here in Erie County and across the United States appreciate you doing that. And you and everybody else, not just yourself. I know there's a team of people.
It's a team. It's bipartisan. And as you say, we owe it to the veterans.
It's a heartfelt thanks on behalf of the veterans. I'm not a veteran, but I do quite a few of them there, and I know they appreciate it. So. Another question that we want to talk about, or another topic, is Alzheimer's disease. And recently you had an editorial in the Erie paper about that, and your experience dealing with not yourself, but a family member. And could you want to share a little bit about that? And I think we have a common bond on this.
Well, sadly, John, almost everybody does. You know, because almost all of us have somebody in our extended family who's been a victim of this disease. So here's the way I look at this. You know, fortunately, we've made terrific progress on so many of the other chronic diseases that affect us in our older age, whether it's heart disease, stroke, various forms of cancer. In many cases we can prevent, in other cases we can cure. In almost all cases we can effectively treat people who are victims of those diseases. But there's one that looms out there that is it's just horrible. We don't know the cause of Alzheimer's. We have no cure. We don't even have a treatment. It's 100% fatal. And it's devastating, obviously, to the victim, but also for the family that's trying to provide care. So I really think in some ways this is a disease that's in a category of its own in terms of just how severe it is. And so I think that our efforts as a federal government should be commensurate to the magnitude of this disease. And so we should be devoting more resources to finding a cure. Now, fortunately, we've got great folks across the Commonwealth, across the country, the Alzheimer's associations across Pennsylvania with whom I visited. They do a great job in providing help and a support structure and advice to caregivers and sometimes facilities where people can go. But there's no substitute for a cure. And I've met personally with Dr. Collins. Dr. Francis Collins is the head of the NIH. Brilliant man with an extremely distinguished background in science and medicine. But I wanted to meet with him one-on-one to discuss how the NIH goes about allocating its resources. Because, frankly, I think more should go to Alzheimer's because it does afflict so many people and because it is so severe. So there are some modest things that we can do. For instance, I'm sponsoring legislation that will allow the Postal Service to have an Alzheimer's stamp. Doesn't sound like much, but you know, other disease-related stamps have raised many tens of millions of dollars. All the proceeds would go to Alzheimer's research. And you know, I think every bit as important as the funds is just raising the awareness about this disease so that as a society we devote more resources to developing the cure more quickly. So I'm hoping we'll make progress on that.
You know, in reading your editorial there, to show you what a small world this is, you mentioned about dealing, you know, working with the Alzheimer's Association of Erie, and of course Kristen Byers, who is one of the people over there, one of the directors. Myself, every year here in Erie, the Alzheimer's Association has a comic relief night where they just have some fun for the caregivers. And for the last several years, I've emceed this event, and it's a lot of fun. And I get to see a lot of people there, you know, and it's just a way for them to relax, have a little fun at a party. And there's probably 200 to 300 people that attend this, so it's a lot of fun. And you know, they bring in some comedians from our local comedy club. But you also mentioned in there Jean Youngquist and her husband Scott. And I grew up together. Well, so it's ironic that I read this, and you know, we grew up, we were neighbors, and of course, unfortunately, his parents have both passed away, and the father had Alzheimer's disease, and you know, it was just sad to hear about that, and the condition that he had fallen into. And I know with my own late grandmother, she had died about 10 years ago. It's an awful disease, and
it really
we all know that. So I applaud your efforts in getting this here. Thank you.
And I want to applaud yours, because when we bring caregivers together, that can be really important. Caregivers, as you may know, on average, live for a shorter period of time than the actual Alzheimer's patient. And in part, it's because of the stress of providing that care. It's 24/7. It's very worrisome. It's a huge burden. And so when you create an opportunity, not only for just a little respite for the caregiver, but also an opportunity to meet with other caregivers so that you understand you're not in this alone. And you can have informal and formal conversations about what works, what helps with the patient who is, you know, struggling through this disease. So I think reaching out to caregivers is a really important part of this.
Well, you know, it just gave me an idea as you're talking there, Senator. The event's usually held in April, and I think if we give you enough advance notice, maybe you could come to the event.
That'd be terrific.
They usually have it at, not usually, they have it at the Erie Shrine Club, the Zim Zim Shrine Club, and it's on like on a Thursday night, starts at about 5 o'clock or so. And maybe they could have you as a guest, you know, to speak or something.
Well, that'd be great.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I understand.
There, Senator, but
you know,
if you're available, you know, I'll
if I'm not stuck in Washington.
Yes, but you can escape once in a while, right?
I do get to escape once in a while, and I take advantage of those opportunities.
Good, yes. And of course, another thing, if we can change gears here a little bit, earlier this year, you introduced legislation Protecting Students from Sexual and Violent Predators Act, which would require schools to perform background checks on all new and existing employees. Can you tell me what the status of that is, where this is, what it's about, and you know where you're at with this here?
So it's shocking and horrifying that we even need to address this, but John, it's real. So that's why I've addressed it. And here's a statistic that's really, I think, very compelling. So far this year, across America, on average, we have had over 1 arrest per day of a teacher or other school employee who's sexually abusing children under their supervision.
Yes.
It's outrageous. And these are the people that we know enough about and have enough evidence for that the prosecutors are willing to press charges and make an arrest. How many more do we not know about? And how many other victims have these monsters had? So when I discovered that there are huge gaps in the background check methodology and systems across the Commonwealth and across the country, it really seemed to call out to really tighten this process up.
Right.
So what my legislation does, and it's bipartisan legislation, it's passed the House unanimously, actually, and I really want this to pass the Senate. What it would do, it would be require background checks, not just of teachers, but any adult that comes in unsupervised contact with kids. So it could be a bus driver, it could be a coach, and it would require that the background check include not just that state's criminal database, but also the federal database in case the perpetrator committed a crime in another state and then moved. And these people do have a tendency to move, to seek out other victims in another place. Another provision that it specifically forbids, and again, it's shocking that we even need this, but we do, and that is this terrible practice by which school districts have been known to take a predator, someone who they know is molesting children. They don't have enough evidence to actually press charges, so they encourage the teacher to leave their job, and they provide them with a letter of recommendation so that they can get a job somewhere else. It's appalling.
It is.
But that's what's happened. And so my legislation would forbid that as well. I think it's just common sense, and I think we want to certainly provide the most secure environment we can for our kids when they're at school.
Sure. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, this would in essence require school districts to be more accountable for that teacher or as an employee that may have been accused of something. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well,
and they're offered to resign, and we'll give you a recommendation.
Well, that happens now, and what my legislation would forbid the practice of providing a recommendation on behalf of a teacher that was a known predator.
Right.
But the heart of it is really to make sure we're providing, doing an adequate background check before a person gets hired, and then periodically during their career as a school employee. We leave a lot of flexibility to individual states to figure out, for instance, how frequently should that background check be administered. But I think it's important that we screen out some, and let's keep in mind, let's just be honest about this. The perpetrators, these predators, they go to where the potential victims are. They're looking to get hired by schools, and we've got to do all we can to protect our kids.
Yes, and I know myself as, our daughter is much older now, but I can tell you that I think as any parent, they appreciate something like that, knowing that their children are going to schools where they don't have to worry about predators.
That's right. Yeah, I've got 3 young kids, and when those kids get on the school bus, boy, you want to feel completely comfortable that you know they're going to a safe environment. Parents deserve that.
Well, let's keep in mind our school years are very, they help form us into what we become, and hopefully we all become responsible adults. And, I have very good memories of school myself there, and I'm thinking, imagine what it would have been like to be a child victim of a predator like that. It would have been awful.
Absolutely.
And how that would have an effect. And I understand that children that are abused, later in life, there's problems that end up happening.
Absolutely.
Just numbers of things.
It can scar a person for decades.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know it's a very uneasy topic to talk about, but we have to. And I appreciate what you folks in the Senate and in the House have done on this right here. You said it was unanimous support in the House.
The House has passed it. Unfortunately, we've run into some roadblocks in the Senate, which is, I know it's kind of shocking. We're working our way through that. I'm confident we will get this done, but I want to do it sooner rather than later.
Yes, and I appreciate that there. Okay. There's a couple other things, if you have time, we can talk about. These are matters that you've been involved in, and we appreciate that. About the EPA about pushing back on our EPA regulation that would give the agency permission to regulate everything in regards to water. Everything from a small irrigation ditch that a farmer may have all the way up to, you know, whatever it might be. And I know the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, which we're a member of, Millcreek Township. We support that. We're glad we're glad you did that. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Let me explain this. The EPA has proposed a new rule, a new way that it intends to administer its power under the Clean Water Act. Clean Water Act's been on the books for a long time. I support it. I think it's appropriate to have legislation that empowers the EPA to make sure our waterways are free of excessive pollutants, and we've made tremendous progress. And Pennsylvania has more creeks and streams and waterways than just about any state in the union, and it's a precious resource for us. But here's the problem. The EPA is really overreaching. The Clean Water Act specifically limits the EPA's jurisdiction to navigable waterways and the direct tributaries to navigable waterways. That's by statute and by design, and it's been the case for many, many years. The EPA is now trying to make the argument that, well, any water that eventually finds its way into a navigable waterway, we have the authority to regulate that as well. Well, that's just about any outdoor water, right? I mean, everything eventually goes somewhere that finds its way into a stream and a river. And so, the ditch in a farmer's on a farmer's property. A temporary puddle that forms after heavy rains where a developer wants to build some homes. If the EPA has its way, developers and farmers and anyone else who wants to use that land and wants to make any alteration is going to need an EPA permit. That is extremely expensive. Actually, you know, with your experience as a township supervisor, we don't need to add this other additional regulatory overlay, especially because in Pennsylvania, we have a DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, which really does a very good job of implementing and regulating our own state laws. And we have farmers who are very conscientious about following best practices and being good custodians of their land and the waterways. So I don't think we need to empower the federal government to come in, overrule everything that's done at the state and local level, and impose huge new costs on farmers, builders, but taxpayers, when townships have to incur huge new costs that they never did before.
And I can tell you from my experience, as I told you prior to the show, I'm a building inspector, and of course I know zoning and planning laws and stuff, and land development. The regulations that are pushed down upon municipalities, and they are literally pushed or forced upon us. And I don't want to seem like I'm railing against any federal or state agency, but the fact is that these things can be very cumbersome, and they hinder development. And
they're expensive.
So at a time we're trying to develop the township and keep it going, these regulations sometimes they're meant to be very well, but sometimes they become overbearing, and they can kill development. So I appreciate what you're doing on that there, and hopefully we can stay with that there too. So
I hope so.
Another thing here with local municipalities, you offered an amendment to the consideration of the Highway Trust Fund, the Highway Trust Fund patch legislation. I'm sorry, which is to expedite reconstruction of damaged roads, bridges. Boy, we got bad roads here too, and we're working on them, but we could use some help on this.
So this is one of the things that's frustrating. You know, Washington imposes so many costs on local communities, on local government, on the state, and that means on taxpayers. So I offered an amendment, and my amendment said this. This was a transportation funding bill. And what my amendment said is that if a road or a bridge is damaged or destroyed by a declared natural disaster, so a hurricane rolls through a community and knocks down a bridge, for instance, and if the community decides to rebuild that bridge exactly where it was, exactly as it was, so you're literally just putting the bricks back in place, then under those circumstances, and those circumstances only, then you wouldn't have to go through all of the environmental permitting all over again, which can take sometimes several years to complete. Unfortunately, we had a vote. Unfortunately, we did not prevail in that. I just think that's common sense. So we got bipartisan support for my amendment, but not enough to get it passed. So I'll be trying again on another occasion and hope that common sense will prevail.
Well, in a parallel sort of setting like that, look at zoning and planning where the term grandfathering,
yeah,
you know, where
sure.
structures that are maybe destroyed can be rebuilt.
Right.
They still have to meet the safety code,
Sure.
but you know, as far as your setbacks and so on. So
Yeah.
This is very good common sense,
Right.
you know, that
Same
it allows
concept.
rights, you know, to
Yeah.
the property owner.
Right.
And here we're talking about that.
And
so.
it wouldn't relieve anybody of all of their state and local obligations to comply with whatever regulations are in force.
Okay. Okay. Well, Senator, we have just a few seconds left here. Anything else you want to throw out to us? Let us know what's happening?
Well, we've
about 15 seconds
covered a
left there,
lot.
okay.
I will say my usual wheelhouse in Congress is to work on policies that will help encourage more economic growth.
Yes.
I think our economy could be much stronger than it is, and a stronger economy means more jobs and upward pressure on wages, which is what I want to see. So
Okay.
that's where I spend most of my time and energy on.
Okay. Well, thank you for being with us, Senator.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay. Have a good day.
You too.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.